Hey, everybody, this is Dan with Pain Free You. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Christine Barba from New Jersey. And she's been on a TMS journey, mind body journey, and what I call perceived danger pain journey for about 4 years, she said.
5.5. Yeah.
5.5.
Yeah.
Okay. So, welcome, Christine. Really thrilled that you decided to do this. All of these success stories have the possibility of helping lots of people. So, why don't you tell us a little bit of a story as to kind of when things started, what was going on in your life, right? Because if we can connect the dots between life stress, turmoil, chaos, emotionally, stress-wise, and the onset of symptoms, then walk us through a little bit about the medical journey, and then when you found out about this concept called TMS, tension myositis syndrome, which is now referred to as the mind body syndrome, which can encompass virtually any type of symptoms whatsoever. And lead us through that journey. We'll have a conversation. If I do see an opportunity to uh, add some value to this conversation with a little bit of coaching, maybe not specific for you, but just in general, some explanations, I'll do that. So I'll shut up. Welcome. I appreciate you being willing to get on camera here and tell your story. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dan. First off, I was saying to you, just your daily videos are what got me through some very, very dark moments of when I was like crumpled on the floor like a child, sometimes just crying. And I told you my mom would say, like, just listen to Dan. So yeah, I'm so grateful for you. But yeah, my story. I guess my symptoms started around 2018, so 5.5 years ago, um, in the throat. It was my 26th birthday at the time. And I had just decided to take a solo trip to Denmark just because I thought it would be fun. And I guess in terms of what was going on at the time, when I look back, it was never one specific moment of some horrible traumatic event or anything like that. I definitely have a lot of the characteristics that you read about people with, perceived danger, pain, TMS. I think definitely perfectionism. So I think I said to you in an audio message, and I'm not sharing this to brag. I don't consider myself naturally smart at all, but I have killed myself in school. In college, I worked really hard, and I was the valedictorian of my English major and my interpersonal communication major. And again, that's not me bragging. A dog on my SATs, like a dog could have done better than I did at the math section. I just worked really, really hard in school, and I was always at the library. It was kind of a joke that my friends had, and
a lot of
really
self a lot of self pressure to
a
perform
lot of
great.
self pressure. Yeah, I would see friends who could just study for a test and in like an hour and get it, and that was not me. But yeah, and then I went to grad school, and my master's program was in English, and I was teaching at the same time, teaching college students, which is really fun. And working at like a publishing company as an internship and then taking classes and definitely really pushing myself. And I think even at that time in my young 20s, I didn't realize like how intense my social anxiety was. You're not even aware sometimes that you have it, which sounds funny. But now that I look back, I think like, wow, even before class, I couldn't have coffee because I was worried I would get really anxious speaking in front of the class and stuff like that. And then definitely people pleasing. I know that's a big one that TMSers have. Um, a lot of people would always say, like, you don't just have to agree, or little things where you just don't want to hurt other people's feelings. And I definitely could relate to that. So yeah, just those things might have been a factor. And then the trip to Denmark, I don't believe this was like the tipping point. And even if it was, it doesn't matter. None of it really matters what the starting point was. But they had said it was just like an upper respiratory infection before my trip. And I went on the trip. They had given me medication, but I remember saying, like, oh, you're going to get better. So just like enjoy your trip to Denmark. And I didn't end up taking the medication. And yeah, so I was there that whole trip and having a pretty good time. But I had been working remotely for a while too. And I really liked that job. Like, I love that job. But yeah, so it was a site focused a lot on brain health and Alzheimer's and dementia. And I look back now and I think, like, wow, with my personality, maybe subconsciously reading about a lot of the things that might happen to the brain
Yeah.
and doing that every day. I don't know if my subconscious took that in, but I did love the job.
There's actually a term called medical student syndrome, where it's
Yes,
they're learning about all the various diseases. They oftentimes get symptoms of those diseases.
100%. And yeah, I'll talk about the one of the people who ultimately helped me had that as a med student. But yeah, so that could have been part of it. I don't know. I did get sick and I was, like a normal 26-year-old, just enjoying myself, like drinking on the trip. It was very cold because I was in Denmark in March. And so I remember it was snowing on my birthday. And yeah, the whole trip was good. There's not one moment where I could say, like, yeah, something awful happened. And that's what triggered this.
Right.
And then I was on the plane back home. And I remember I was still just like, I kept saying to my mom initially, like, I'm just having these weird sensations in my throat and kind of like chest area. And it's not like a normal sore throat.
Right.
Uh, and it was just really more like annoying initially and then like scary because you don't think that's going to stick around.
Right.
And yeah, so I came home and then I went to just some normal, like, I went to urgent care and they kind of just like misdiagnosed it as, I don't know, some other cold or flu that she said was going around. And I took the medication for that, and I was still having the symptoms. And I remember, like, yeah, my throat pain, can I say pain? My throat pain. Yeah, my throat pain was still getting like pretty intense. And it was just really uncomfortable. I had pretty intense, like, vocal fry, I guess, raspy voice.
Sure.
Um, and so then at that point, I was like, well, this hasn't gone away with the urgent care medication. I'll go to an ENT
Sure.
just to try it out. And I was already, I guess, a little bit, I don't know, I'd never most of my life been sick a lot or gone to doctors a lot, but I kind of had found that the times I usually just ended up getting better on my own, unless it was just something that medication could help briefly, like, I don't know, bronchitis. And so I went to an ENT and then he had looked and he said, he used that word that a lot of the, or term diagnosis, a lot of the throat people get, which I personally, I don't believe in any of these labels anymore, but he said, I think you have muscle tension dysphonia. And then he recommended that I go to speech therapy, which I guess at that point, I had never heard that term. I didn't understand why they recommend speech therapy or anything, because when you're in there, they don't really explain that. And I remember just being actually more just like frustrated and like, speech therapy, like I have like symptoms, physical symptoms. And so I didn't pursue that. At one point, I did do like a brief stint of speech therapy, and I was like, how is blowing into a straw and making bubbles helpful? But anyway, so
Interesting.
yeah.
And
Um,
was there a medical term they used? I know you're a little
oh,
hesitant.
sorry. Yeah. So he said muscle tension dysphonia was the first one that he threw out, which I
I
got that
wasn't
a
sure if
lot.
you were ever diagnosed with globus, which is another term for that.
Yeah,
Like a
I
lump
got
in the
so many
throat.
yeah, Globus. I collected diagnoses, which actually makes me a pretty good poster child for TMS. Like, and I only kept going to doctors. I always hesitate to say this because it makes you sound crazy. But it's because you're suffering so badly, like so badly. And I went to probably a total over the course of the 5.5 years, 50 doctors, I think.
Oh,
And I know that makes me sound like insane, which maybe you
No,
kind of,
not at
yeah,
all.
yeah, it's just you're suffering really badly and you're no one, I don't know, really a lot, some doctors know that it's just a loop in your brain that starts from one scary diagnosis. But yeah, so I went to that guy and then I was kind of like, well, I don't know, that wasn't helpful. And then I honestly for I guess at least a year and a half, I kind of just stopped going to doctors and just living with like this really debilitating pain throughout my throat. It was kind of in this area too, just really, really
Yes.
painful. Yeah, the chest. And my voice just kept getting like raspier. And I remember just like thinking like, what is going on? Um, and so I think I started to get really scared when like one that it had been going on for so long. But I remember I went on vacation with my parents maybe 2019, like April of 2019.
Right.
And I was avoiding like speaking to anyone because it was excruciatingly painful. And
Sure.
it's funny now to look back, like avoidance behaviors, is something that you start to do with TMS that you shouldn't do. But because you're in pain, you start avoiding doing any of the activities. And
Right.
so I stopped. I remember we were in the pool and my mom was like talking to these guys, and I just didn't want to talk because it hurt so bad. And I think that was the point where I was just like, I need to go back to a doctor. This is not normal.
Yeah.
And so that was April of 2019. And I believe maybe May of 2019, around then, I started seeing some of the top ENTs in, New York and
Sure.
being from New Jersey, and the ones that have all the books out and those all those terms that we have. And yeah, I thought like, well, this might be helpful. And then it gave me a lot of hope reading, about like the acid watchers diet. And I was like, oh, if I just change my diet, like that's such a relief. And obviously now I think you and I share the same belief on diet, where in my opinion, it's not diet that
It has
changes
nothing. Yeah,
symptoms.
your pain wasn't there because of diet, so
No,
changing your diet won't allow it to go away.
100%. But yeah, at the time when you're desperate and you find a new approach, like, oh, great, I can change my diet, and I would be happy to do that. It seems healthy anyways. So I read all those books and I started the diet, very strict diet. And I remember being depressed about that. Like, now I can't even eat all the foods I like. Initially, it seemed positive. Like I said, like it can't hurt to eat healthy for a bit. But then it started to feel so limiting and so depressing. And yeah, so I went to some of them and I was almost hopeful. And like they used pretty scary terms, but I went to the one guy and he said, he looked, and I think at that point I had gone to maybe one other ENT who looked and said there was nothing there, which is what's so funny. It's so subjective. And then I went to, yeah, this one doctor who looked and he was like, I think one of them used the term, and I'm not making it just sounds so funny that a doctor would say this, but they had said something like, wow, it's a mess in there or something. And
Is that a
I was
scientific definition, doctor?
and I was almost relieved though. I was like, this makes so much sense. Like, how could I be in so much pain if it's not a mess in there? Like,
Right.
um, and so then he had said that I had esophagitis, which, yeah, just another term.
Right.
And that's a bad one. Like, if you look it up, it's like, no wonder I'm in so much pain. I have esophagitis. He mentioned that I had gone to a really nice gastro doctor. And right before the ENTs. And he had used the term, he said, like, Christine, I think you might have neuropathy, which is really scary to hear that you might, then of course I made the mistake of looking that up online. And then I remember being like, great, I have nerve pain in my throat. That's like horrifying.
Yeah.
And he was a very nice person, like a really empathetic doctor. But he had said, and I was just confused why they recommended this because I didn't know that's the treatment that ENTs and gastros kind of use sometimes to tackle the stuff in the throat. So he had said, like, I want to try to put you on like an antidepressant and anxiety medication. And I remember at that point, I was actually very offended because you don't like, I didn't understand why they were saying that. You're in pain. And I knew he meant well as a person because he was actually, yeah, a very good guy. But it was just really scary. So then, yeah, the esophagitis was another collection. And that guy also had said, like, you might have neuropathy. And I remember being in such denial at that point of like, well, I don't want to have neuropathy. So esophagitis.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. I thought it, I thought it turned off.
no,
So
okay.
esophagitis sounds almost better to me. And
You're selecting your diagnosis for the one you'd rather have.
yeah, yeah. And which sounds wild, but you just get so hopeless. And I remember being like, with that one, I can use diet. But then I went to another top ENT and in New York, just to kind of get like a second opinion when you're still doing the diet, still suffering. And yeah, she had said, which was pretty scary. She said, I know exactly what's wrong with you. The same exact thing happened to me in, she could say the exact year. She said like 1980, I got a virus. This was what happened. And she said, she was like, and as you could see, like, I know she kind of had a raspy voice. And she's like, I never got like my voice back, but this is why I help other people. But she had said, yeah, you have, it's called like post-viral vagal neuropathy, um, which, and LPR, right? They all tell you that you have LPR. And I don't believe in any of these terms anymore. I actually don't think any of them are real, in my opinion. And yeah, so post-viral vagal,
LPR is pretty much reflux.
it's reflux. And I actually don't even believe in the term LPR. I think people get stressed and they have perceived danger pain. And yeah, maybe you could get reflux when you're stressed, but a lot of us get reflux and we're not. And even the word reflux, it annoys me because it's like, yeah, you have a bodily function where some stuff is coming up, but you're fine.
Yeah.
And that's just my opinion now because of my experience. But
Mhm.
yeah, so she said, you know, you have LPR and this vagus nerve condition, basically, that you get a virus and then it affects that in your throat, whatever. And so she had said, like, yeah, you're never going to be able to sleep lying down again. Um, you're never going to be able to have like coffee again, or like a lot of the food. She gave me a list of foods I would have to eat for the rest of my life.
So real quick, let's just share with the audience that before this call, you made sure you had your coffee for the morning.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I went and got my morning coffee
So
today, and I'm
these
not
are
in.
things she has been told, but did not prove to be accurate. So
Yes,
that sounds like this lady had a whole bunch of nocebos and fear herself around this stuff.
I think she had TMS. It's just my opinion. Maybe she had TMS, and I hope that could like help her too. Yeah, and because you can get better even if, as you know, it's been 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff. And so then she had wanted to put me on like amitriptyline, the antidepressant, and gabapentin, which is normally like an epilepsy drug, as you know, but they try to use it to treat pain. And I am doing air quotes because none of the medications really ever help. I don't really like medication, but they never helped. And I think it's all placebo. Like if you believe it's going to help, then that's great. But so I was going on a trip I had planned to Switzerland at the point I was seeing these doctors because I had hoped that I was going to get better by that point. And so I planned this month-long trip there. And I was still just suffering like horrifically that whole trip, which was sad because I'd been there 2 summers before and had the time of my life. And when I wasn't sick, or several summers before. And yeah, I remember just being there and it was all I could think about was my throat, my breathing, the pain. It was, I think the saddest thing in the world is being in the place you love, like more than anywhere on earth, or one of the places you really love, and being so miserable and scared and sad.
Yeah.
Um, And so at that point, I didn't take the medications that she prescribed because my dad's cousin, who is a doctor, actually luckily said, like, Christy, like, I wouldn't do that. It sounds like maybe you're like spending a lot of money to go to people with pretty big egos, and sometimes those aren't the most helpful. Like, he said it in a very nice way as a relative. And
Yeah.
so I held off on taking those. I left Switzerland early. I was still working at the time, at, the job focused on brain health. And then I was doing some like travel editing, which was fun. Um, and I went home early, like so desperate and sad. And then by that point, I was like, well, maybe I should take this gabapentin. You just, like, the state of desperation was really extreme at that point, and sadness and fear. And
And
so then,
you're in your 20s, so it's like, oh my goodness, what's my life look like? Is
yeah,
this
I
the
thought,
rest of my life? And that's where you start to not just be anxious and fearful, but start to think depression because you're striking out with these doctors
yeah,
helping you, and then you're going, holy crap, what if this is the rest of my life? And I end up like this doctor who's been dealing with for 30 years and not sleeping, laying down.
yeah, and that's the core fear thought, right? Is, what if I have to live like this the rest of my life? And you don't. But that is the thought that run what you just said. And I had actually never been depressed like before this because I was so sick. I'd never had depression, definitely anxiety, but and like I said, you're not even aware sometimes that you have bad anxiety, or I wasn't.
Yeah. Can
But
I just make a point on depression for anybody who's listening? My take on depression is it's deep sadness, right? But everybody has sadness sometimes. It turns into depression when you have no hope.
yep.
You take deep sadness over what you're feeling and how you're struggling and how much it hurts and the fact that doctor, no results. So you're really sad about that. But then the no hope is where you start to have that feeling of weight and depression. And the cool part is for anybody who is depressed about their symptoms, when you recognize that there's a solution, and this is what we'll get to later in this conversation, but when you realize that there's a way to recover and reverse these symptoms, now all of a sudden you get some hope, and that depression turns into, okay, I'm still sad about where I am, but I see that there's a future here, and I believe I can get better. And so it's that hope that really helps to lift the depression.
Yeah,
Um,
that's perfectly said. It's definitely the hope. And you had, I think, brought up someone you spoke to who said, I realized I wasn't depressed when all of the symptoms when I was just feeling kind of hopeless that they weren't going to go away, or something like that. That was very accurate. Yeah, so then I took the gabapentin, and it had only been 3 days um, of taking that. And then I took the amitriptyline she had given me. And I now know, obviously, no, it was not the gabapentin that caused this. It was my state of intense fear and worry. But basically, then I started taking the medication, and then the pain spread into like my feet and my eyes and my whole face, which I've had on and off of these 5 years. It's moved anywhere you can imagine. My eyes, my face, like, not good. But at that point, it had really spread like anywhere on the body you could think of. And I attributed it to the medication, not recognizing that I was clearly in such a state of
Here.
terror. Yeah, yeah, like fear.
Mhm.
And so then I remember my mom and I was like, can we just like go see this doctor who prescribed it? Maybe she'll like help me, give me hope. And I hadn't seen her in a little bit because, luckily my dad's cousin and relatives had said not to. But yeah, so I remember it was 9/11, and my mom and I went into New York and to see this doctor who prescribed it. And when I share this, and I've shared this now with like a very lovely, compassionate, and I'll go into my thoughts on therapy and why this therapist did work, but talk therapy. But anyways, he said, because I was like, I know this will sound crazy, or that I like don't remember correctly what she had said to me, or that I'm making it, but this is what she had said. I went into the office and I basically started sobbing, and I was so sad. My mom was sitting there on the couch too and was there for this. And I was like, now it like spread to my feet and it's spreading everywhere. And just, I was basically asking for help. And she had said she was mad that I went to the other doctor who's kind of like her competitor in New York, which is so crazy that they don't just work together to help people. And he was mad that I went to her. He yelled at me for that as well. And so she yelled at me for not coming in, and she made a show of she had her cell phone with her, and we had each other's numbers because she gives patients her cell phone. And she was like, do you have your phone with you? Take out your phone. So I did. And she started like calling me and like while I was sitting next to her. And then she was like, hi, Christine, this is, the doctor. You could have called me anytime in the past month to have shared that this was going on, but instead you didn't. And then she truly said, she was like, and now you come in crying that it spread to your feet. You look. She didn't say this is, she's like, you just look pathetic, absolutely pathetic.
The doctor's telling you this.
The doctor said this, and you share this, and people would say, like, no, you remember it falsely. But I don't remember it falsely because it was the most horrible thing a medical professional could ever have done.
And this
And
is a mental health professional,
no, this was
a doctor, medical
a laryngal, what's above ENT, the higher one, who's above ENT.
laryngologist or something. Yeah.
Yeah, these doctors were behind a lot of the terms that are out there, such as LPR and all this stuff that it affects your throat, which I don't
How
believe in.
dare they make fun of you? That's just
Yeah, so it got
that's
in.
malpractice. It's emotional abuse from a doctor to a patient.
Yeah. So basically, then she had said, like, it's spreading to your feet. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And she pointed to a window and said, that would be like telling me there's penguins outside in July right now. And she was kind of right when she said, she was like, you need to see a psychologist or a neurologist. And yes, you do need to recognize it's coming from your emotions. But obviously, she was yelling. She was truly yelling. And then she was like, and mom, like, you have to make to my mom, you have to make sure that she does start taking the medication. And then she went on to say she had a girl with this speaking pain, and she just kept upping the dose to I can't remember the exact number, but I remember doing the calculations. And when you look, and it's what she's still on this medication herself on gabapentin. She said she just kept upping it until the girl was on like thousands of milligrams of
Oh
gabapentin,
God.
and then it went away. But first of all, that's not allowed to do that to patients. And so anyways, I remember after that, oh, and then she hugged us at the end and apologized because she said it was 9/11, and sometimes she feels more sad and emotional on 9/11, and gave my mom and I a hug.
After
And
yelling at you and telling you that you're crazy.
yeah, it was a while. It was an hour of like being yelled at. And again, you share this and people will be like, no way, like, no, you remember this
I
wrong.
believe it. No, I believe it.
Yeah. And
And your
that's
mom was there too, so it's not like you both heard the wrong thing.
my mom was there. And this is what I've told this really compassionate guy now I've been working with. And he was like, Christine, like, I believe you. Like, I don't think anyone doesn't believe that that happened. It's just you start to doubt yourself because it's so intense. So, anyways, after that, I did write like a review about it because I was so just infuriated. Honestly, if John Sarno talks about rage, I don't think I recognized like how angry I was at that
Well, not
person.
just this doctor, but all the doctors who are telling you different things, and none of them are providing any solutions at work.
Yes, it's the lack of relief. Like if it had worked, I'd been like, I don't care if you yell at me, I love you, which is terrible. But yeah, so I wrote a review on Google, and then I think I had said like, gosh, for $900 a visit, this should not happen. And there's other funny reviews online of where she's like ripped patients' blood results into shreds in front of them, and that's all on Google. So I wrote the review, and I guess her staff had seen that with me saying like it's about the money or something. And it was pretty interesting because a few weeks later, she sent me like a check for the several visits I had gone to, and basically all of the money back, the what, $1,800 that for the
Huh.
two visits, or so that was funny. But
Well, at least
anyway,
you had the integrity to do that.
yeah, yeah. And
Or she was trying to buy you to take the reviews down, one of the two.
yeah, I don't
But
know. And
we're a little
I,
bit off track. We don't have to
yeah,
get into the whole doctor dynamic. How about you know, what else was going on in the medical journey, and when did you find out about the whole mind body reason for
yeah. So
him?
I think again, the last thing I'll say is I'm so grateful for all of those experiences. I'm not angry because now it's like, well, thank God they brought me to, being fine. But yeah, so then I'll just briefly share like a list for 1 minute of just other procedures I had and then try to go into when I found TMS. Yeah, so I had three, I guess, not surgeries, but kind of throat surgeries because I was under anesthesia, and it's called this neurologist in LA tried pulsed radio frequency, which is basically putting like intensely heated needles in your throat nerves, the vagus nerve and the glossal nerves there, to try and stop the pain. And he was actually very nice. He injected like exosomes in my vagus nerve, and this was all under uh, anesthesia. So I say three throat surgeries, but I don't know if it's fully considered a surgery. I had ketamine infusions. That doctor was super lovely. He thought I had Lyme, but yeah, I was on like 1,500 milligrams of ketamine. Any procedure you could really imagine, chiropractic care, just like anything to get help. The other form of TMS, which is not TMS, but the transcranial
Yeah.
magnetic stimulation, um, everything. And then when I found out about TMS around the time I did, it was right when so then COVID kind of hit the world, and I was already going through all these surgeries at that time in LA. And that doctor had kind of said, like, well, if you go home, we don't know how the flights will be. You might not be able to get back. And I was enrolled in some of like clinical trials with him. And again, you're just so desperate that I was like, well, I'll stay in LA, which now looking back, being in a hotel room alone for like 5 months,
Right.
um, every day was probably not for me the best thing I could have done as a TMSer. And especially when you still think something is wrong with you. And then I remember I left like all of the very negative Facebook groups related to a lot of the terms I had heard that are really scary. And then I found, I think, just some of like the TMS related, just little like groups and the most inspiring thing for me was I found, there's a guy, Matt, who has like an awesome story of overcoming full body
Matt
chronic.
Iac or something.
Yep. Yeah. He's
I
probably the
know his
most,
story.
yeah, I always credit him to being, and I will always credit him to being one of the people who clearly kept me inspired and hopeful to get my life back, kind of like you. Um, and yeah, so same story, like 45 doctors, ketamine infusions, and he read John Sarno, and for him it just clicked. I was not one of those people. And I know you just talked about that today about the book Cure in a video, but I was not one of those people who believed it. He did. And yeah, overcame, like 5 years too of being bedbound, basically
Yeah.
not walking. Anyways, so I read his story and I remember it gave me a lot of hope. And then we became friends, and he kept saying, like, you have TMS, you have TMS for a while. And then I talked to you on the phone too, and it gave me like hope that day. But as you know, well, yeah, I was one of those people where what you talked about in the video, when it terrifies you to believe like this is coming from the brain, I think
I'm
for
scared of
me,
my brain. Sure.
yeah, for me, that idea actually, and like having to go to neurologists, which I had been like, that always scared me a lot. Like, how could something so terrible be coming from the brain? Because I didn't understand. I guess I just didn't understand it. And I was so stuck in the loop, so intensely stuck. So it's kind of like you always say in your videos, like I knew about this stuff, but I just Well, I guess I'm one of those people who truly made every mistake in the book, like you say. Um, yeah, and then I luckily they're such an awesome community. I got involved with like Dr. Joe and his work, and they're so great. I love Dr. Joe. Uh,
Dispenza?
sorry, yes, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's definitely like you and Matt, like one of my heroes. Um, but I still was just so stuck in it almost becomes, and I'm gonna use the term like sensory motor OCD, but it's all the same stuff, right? TMS, PDP. I hate using new labels because then people will be like, well, great, now I have this, like you said. But for me, it had become kind of sensory motor OCD. I couldn't stop focusing on my breathing and my throat and the globus, and the pain was so bad. Speaking was excruciating. And then I started going to Dr. Joe's events, and I had never meditated before. And I started meditating. And initially, it really gave me like hope, like this is the way out. I was watching every testimonial on his page. And it's so inspiring. Like he helps so many people. I didn't realize that myself, having never meditated. I think Alan Gordon talks about this when sometimes if you have a TMS personality and you're meditating, like I would try to meditate for like 9 hours a day and then not understand why it was getting more intense because I truly didn't understand when his staff would say to me, like, you're already okay. And they were right. And I was going into meditations, which I had never explained to them. I didn't know I was doing it wrong. I would like focus and be like, oh, my vagus nerve is here. These nerves are here. And like such intense focus on that area. And I was going into it with fear rather than what you're supposed to do, which is now I actually really like meditating, being calm. And there was a moment at his or moments at his event where it was like my first time in 2 years, like laughing without pain and breathing without pain and speaking without it. And I remember his staff member, she's awesome. And she had found me on the beach, like on the sand, because we were doing a walking meditation. And I was like crying with joy because that hadn't happened in so long. And then it was really nice. They had asked me to kind of share my story, but I was also very honest, like probably way too honest. I spewed out my whole story like I'm doing with you. But I had said like I am still in pain. I do still have all this. And he was awesome. He said to like that audience of 1,400 people, like, you know, what would you tell someone like this? And they were shouting like, keep going. And it was that was really nice. But being a TMSer, then I realized that I started to turn that into like a perfectionistic thing too. And
The
so I would be
recovery process. Yeah.
Yep, I became obsessed with fixing, which actually this wonderful woman, Lindsay, that he works with, had said that to me, like, stop making your life about fixing. And she was so right. I just didn't know that I don't think I was even aware at that point how it becomes like an obsession, basically. And yeah, so I also felt really guilty when like people would come up to me and be like, your story was very inspiring. And yet I'm still talking to them in excruciating pain. It's spreading throughout my face. It was, my whole body at times. So I was being a perfectionist about that too.
Yeah.
And
A lot of a lot of people take their perfectionistic way of life
into
and they
fixing.
go, okay, so it's a mind body thing. Now I'm going to heal perfectly and intensely and get
Yeah,
this done. And they
that
try
was
too
me.
hard. They try too hard.
Yeah, I tried way, way, way too hard. And that's exactly what I was doing. And I think people were confused because they'd see me like traveling and posting photos of me traveling, and no one would really know that I was suffering so horrifically inside, physically and mentally, because you look fine and I was trying hard. And, anyways, so yeah, all of that happened. And then the desperation came back again. And I should mention throughout a lot of this time, I would like return to your videos for hope. But you always talk about people who are like floundering and not, you don't say floundering, but you say like you have to be consistent and pick, I forget how you phrased it, like pick a ship or pick a route like to stick with. You've never said that, but like pick a certain path and stick with it so you can believe enough to get well. And I wasn't doing that. And so then coming up to now, the full circle more recently in the recovery. So knew about TMS this whole time, believed it, knew about Matt's story, knew about you, but I was still just like so stuck on this vagus nerve. That was the one that stuck for me. Like it's, and I know you talk about
Well, the deal
that.
is though, if you know it's TMS and you believe it's TMS, then the nerve has absolutely nothing to do with it. The nerve
Correct.
is not involved. That's just the location where you're feeling the symptoms. But I don't believe with TMS or perceived danger pain that we actually have a problem physically.
We don't have a problem physically, and I clearly didn't believe that. I was so convinced that there was something wrong with this nerve, and there's to clarify to your audience, and it is now my belief there's no such thing as any of that. There's nothing wrong with you or your nerves. It's PDP or TMS. But I was so desperate last summer that then I signed up for this pain clinic that's meant to treat like some of the most chronically ill patients in the world, which like, yeah, that's a great idea, Christine.
Yeah, let's
Let's
go hang out with people who
yeah,
are
let's ramp up your.
desperately ill. And these people have real diseases,
No, I actually
or do you think
interacting
they
with
all
them,
had TMS?
it gives me so much hope. It's so many young girls, is what I noticed around my age or a little younger, or just young people. A lot of young people are in their 20s, is kind of teens, maybe 30s. I was 30 at that point. But yeah, it was so, and all of our characteristics when you would get to know these awesome people, they're amazing people. And they're so similar, like the perfectionism and being like the top in their school. And it was kind of hard to, when I went there, I, it was weird. I think what I kept repeating to my mom is like, I know I just need someone for a set amount of time to keep giving me reassurance. But I wasn't describing that properly, I don't think. I just kept saying like that. And so I went to the clinic, and their approach is using all of these like very physical machines. And I forget what the one machine's called, but the point is to actually put you in like more pain in that area to show your brain that you can handle it.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, I don't understand why this thing wrapped around my throat. Like, that's not going to help the fact I had literally become obsessed, not obsessed about breathing. I was actually even like so confused about, am I breathing right? Am I breathing wrong? Should I do it through my nose or my mouth? Like sensory motor OCD. It was torture. And I don't think I was explaining that properly. And then they had said, like, something must have happened with my muscles and in my throat, all this stuff. So actually, I was only there for 16 days, which sounds funny, but and I remember then I had a talk with the woman who ran the clinic, and I said, like, I will like pay you if you could just help me without the machines. So please just like teach me how to breathe again and like reinforce things. And it wasn't her, but her one staff member had said that there was no way these machines could like there was no way the human body could replicate what these machines were doing to help people. And I was so against that belief
Right.
that yeah, basically I said like I don't believe in it. I was like, I believe in the mind body stuff. Um
But yet
and
you're there at a place that's putting a machine on your neck.
yeah, and then she had actually said, even though 16 days before, she recommended, thank God, this amazing program called the Lightning Program to me. And it was, for me, it wasn't the program. It was I mean, it is the program, but the woman who runs it, which I'll share, is just so incredible and really gets it. But on day one, they had recommended it to me. And then when I was wanting to leave because I didn't believe in the machines, she said, that I was too fearful probably for something like the lightning program to work. And she already knew that I had done all the Dr. Joe stuff and was struggling. But I said, I was like, I've been doing it, but I know I haven't been doing it right or consistently. But she wouldn't let me stay if I wasn't going to use the machines. So I left, and I was still really struggling up until now we're coming to this, this year. And so probably my like worst rock bottom was I had left there. My mom and I actually stayed in the state where that was, just because I kind of wanted to regroup and
Right.
figure out. I was trying to do TMS on my own, almost like the work, but while still in this place that I had been at the most fearful
Yeah.
air environment. So yeah, then I finally came home, and this December, I went to December 2022. I went to the emergency room for like the first time for all of this stuff. And it was mostly just because I didn't know what to do anymore. And
Right.
uh, at that point, I was crying every day. And basically, I had said, like, I want to live. I do want to live, but I can't live like this anymore. And they basically had to make sure that, have me let them know that I wasn't serious. I mean, I was definitely having like thoughts all the time of, I don't want to be on this planet anymore.
Yeah.
But I knew I wasn't going to act on it. That would be really unfair to the people who need to get better. And I wanted to get better. So I wasn't, and you, one of
Oh,
your success stories.
yeah. If I can help you turn the corner here, when did you go all in on the mind body work? Because it sounds
Had
like
that.
up until this point in your story, you're aware of it, you kind of believed in it, but you were straddling the fence,
Yeah. So it was at that point.
still trying to work both sides of the fence.
Well, yep, that's perfectly put. Yeah, basically that point. So they gave me a list of psychiatrists, and I was very against that because, I talk therapy is not helpful. But I found a place called Brighter Living, and that was just at the top of the list, which is why I called in my desperation. And then I spoke to this amazing, I knew he was amazing because he had the belief I did that matches what you say about TMS and PDP, and it was the same stuff. So, yeah, Dr. Kenneth Lichtman was the psychiatrist, and I spoke to him. And he said, like, for a year and a half in med school, I had like the exact same stuff with my throat and globus. And he basically said, but it's all just coming from like a loop in the brain, and it's sensory motor OCD was the term he used. And I
Right.
was like, yes, that's what I believe, but I like need someone to help me get out of this loop. And I want to clarify, you don't need a psychiatrist to get out of the loop. You 100% don't. I was just in such a state of rock bottom that I was scared of my thoughts and everything.
Mhm.
And so I started seeing him, and then at that same time in January, I started working with this woman, Amanda Ashley from the Lightning program. And again, it's all very similar, the belief, which is just that this stuff is coming from your brain. Um, Amanda had had a daughter with like chronic illness for 5 years who overcame it from basically rewiring her brain to not even rewiring, that sounds intense, but just from knowing you're okay and doing the stuff you've avoided. I think that simplifies it. So worked with him, worked with her, and then I kept getting that reassurance, which was such a game changer. And then he finally, because I was still really struggling just from so many years of doubt and fear and avoidance, and he had said, I think, Christine, like you've tried many treatments, but you haven't had the right treatment, which basically is what you can do naturally and what you talk about every day, Dan, just like exposure therapy, essentially, which is just going out and living your life, right? That term is not what you need to do. It was more that I had started avoiding everything.
Yeah.
And so literally just things like sitting at a computer was like terrifying for me, sitting in a car, pretty much anything. Um, and it was more again, like you say, it's not the professionals, doing this. It's just finally having had compassionate people like you to keep reiterating what was going on, reinforcing that. And then I now work with, like I had been working with this awesome, or I am, this awesome therapist, Dr. Alex Bush he's probably my age, at the Stress and Anxiety Center in New Jersey, which again, I hesitated to share a lot of this because I never want people to think that's what they have to do to heal, like go pay for things. Just for me, it helped. And he started to talk to me about what was going on and some of the weird things I had started saying, like, yeah, how should you breathe? What do you feel when you breathe? Which is not normal questions. And then he sits with me, and he has had me just like do things I had avoided for so long, even just like sitting and speaking to someone because it's so painful, or it had been so painful. And yeah, I would say that like trifecta of just what it really took was just the constant reassurance, which I really needed personally.
Mhm.
um, crushing, I think there's another good page with the other Dan called like crushing doubt, which is what you do every day.
And
But
Radner.
yeah, this stuff feeds on the doubt, and that's being reminded of that over and over is very helpful. And yeah, I guess also just like you say, every day, like knowing you're okay. The biggest piece was definitely going out and living my life and doing what you suggest to your audience. Literally like doing the stuff you love again. I'm finally, well, I overcame, obviously, I guess the thing I should share is that, yeah, I've, no more throat pain, excruciating throat pain. Yeah, no more speaking pain, no more pain in my eyes. And my, probably people would have considered it trigeminal. None of that. No more full body pain. Just, yeah, all of the symptoms. Oh, my ears, I would get pain. Like it's all gone. And just such a big part of that was, I remember when I was still recovering, like recently, this literally just happened within a few months, and it took a few months.
Mhm.
Um, but I was watching your videos just for like comfort. Like I would be in a store and still feeling terrified, and then I would put on one of your videos, and that's kind of how I knew I was getting better. Was that I didn't have to watch an entire playlist, which you tell people not to do, and then I was only listening to like a few, and then I would go live my life, like you said. So yeah, now I guess thanks to you and the people who really do know about this stuff. Um, yeah, I'm finally like enjoying my writing again and sending out a bunch of pitches. I'm going on a really exciting upcoming travels happening, which is I know is going to be so different without pain. So I kind of told you, but yeah, my friends and I are going to on a safari in Africa in September, and then on like a 9-day cruise to like 4 different islands in January. Every week in the U.S., we're going to like different states we haven't been to, and I thought I would never like hike again or do anything enjoyable again. We've been doing these very long hikes at national parks. I'm in Nantucket with my awesome family this week and got to enjoy that without pain. So yeah, but I know that was a very long story, but it's just to say, like, one, thank you so much. And definitely when you think you're at like the worst rock bottom of your life, which was, I think, my entire 5.5 years. I don't even want to go into just like how dark it was, but it was very dark. And
Sure.
I didn't believe it could happen for me. Oh, and Hardeep too. So your wonderful throat success story with Hardeep. He
Yeah,
had just
Hardeep is
like,
awesome.
I
For
love
people
that
who don't
guy.
know, go to dansyoutube.com, click on playlists, and then scroll through there. If anybody's dealing with throat pain, Hardeep, Hardeep, great guy. He was even a public speaker, and he had throat pain, speaking pain, and he was able to overcome it through a lot of my work. And I don't know if he had ancillary things he was doing, but for the most part, correct me if I'm wrong, Christine. It came from accepting that this is what was going on. Because until you accepted that, because you were like, yeah, the brain, the mind body stuff, okay, okay, but I have this nerve thing. I have this nerve thing, and you kept on coming back to the nerve and this. And, you know, continuing to go to doctors, they're going to continue to point at your body. And at a certain point in time, not just you, but everybody really needs to go, you mean my body's okay? My body's really okay? And that's what I tell you folks every single day in my daily videos. Yeah, your body is really okay. And when you get it from the intellect to wisdom, when you truly understand that, that's when the fear can start coming down. And for anybody who hasn't heard me talk about it, fear is the driver. Perceived danger is what causes the brain to warn us. Because if your brain thinks you've got a problem in your throat, it's going to warn you by making speaking hurt, by making breathing even hurt, by making eating even hurt, a cough, a burp, whatever it may be. Um, the brain's just doing its job to protect you. And for anybody who hears about all this stuff and goes, this is coming from my brain. Now I'm terrified of my brain. And it's driven by fear. Now I'm afraid of fear. I'm not allowed to be afraid ever, but I'm terrified. How am I ever going to get better because I am scared? And I always talk about how we need to counteract the fear with accurate information. Because when we truly know what's going on, it's like, yeah, this is a pretty challenging experience. But if my body's actually okay and there's a solution, and the solution comes from dialing down fear, then okay, maybe I can do this. And you start to see glimpses of some changes.
Yeah, I think the last, like, you are probably the person, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, who out of anyone, and you could say I tried a lot of stuff. I've never seen it just simplified to the point where it makes so much sense. My mom kept saying, like, thank God for Dan. He's the only one where it just like makes sense to me. All this other stuff is so complicated. And my dad too. My dad loves you to be like, go listen to Dan when I would be like in freak out mode, which you helped me with that a lot too. I told you, but one thing as I was recovering recently, if I would catch my brain going into that like catastrophizing, yeah, then I had you in the back of my head. And so I was like, oh my God, and your imitation of the freak out, which I had actually become a genius at doing that. Like, my whole life is over. And it's not, you just think that for the moment. But yeah, so having you and being able to laugh about it. So now I'll even like, just to be funny and make myself laugh, I'll like curse at my brain, not in a negative way, but I'll just like come up with my one friend has like a funny phrase we came up with that's just like parasitic worthless dullard. And that's not to say you should be mean to yourself. You should do the very opposite. But if it's making you laugh, so then I'm just like, you parasitic worthless dullard, just like stop it. Little things that you helped a lot with, like keeping everyone calm in your videos and just like helping us recognize what's going on when you're doing that freak out and catastrophizing. So yeah, thank you. And it's what you said, it's truly just like one diagnosis could, well, I think one diagnosis can do that with like bad, what do you say, bad data, misinformation, and fear is
Yeah,
what
I
the
mean, I always say your brain and your nervous system is working perfectly, right?
Mhm.
Flawlessly, perfectly. And people are like, how can you say that? I'm all, everything's going on. I'm all dysregulated. It's working perfectly. It's just operating on misinformation, bad data, and fear. Because when you're fearful or even terrified, which you did in much of your journey, you were terrified. Um, the system is working perfectly. It's just the volume is turned up to 11, and the
Yeah,
volume only goes up to 10. So for many of us, the volume of the nervous system is up here at a really high state of alertness, vigilance, but it's working perfectly. It's almost working too perfectly because it's amplifying normal sensations from the body, like breathing or eating or speaking. It's amplifying them, and the brain's going, oh no, we got a problem. So the
yeah,
nervous system is working perfectly because you can feel every sensation, but the brain's just misinterpreting it based on bad data that I have a problem here. Bad data plus fear equals, here's our symptom. And then we can get stuck
yeah.
in a fear pain loop.
What you said about the nervous system, just Hardeep with the, he's a throat success story. He said something so funny to me on our call when I was still really hyper focused, like before I changed my mind. And he was like, what you have to think, like, what person your age is just like thinking about their tongue all day? Because at that point I was, I don't know, obsessing about that. And then he was like, you should be focusing on like whatever it is, like dating or finances or like normal things to worry about. And then an awesome girl who you've been helping through your videos, also having throat stuff, and she's overcoming it. But I remember one time when she's still kind of starting the process, and she was like, I don't know, like maybe it's that I'm in the sympathetic state and not the parasympathetic. And she had spoken to Hardeep, I think, on a call as well, or maybe watched his testimonial. And I said, remember what Hardeep said? You have to remember, like, what normal person is thinking throughout their day? Am I in the parasympathetic state or the sympathetic? And then I use, what you say and John Sarno, like, go live your life. And I also, one last thing, I think of Dr. Joe, who he would always say, which I love. He's like, the only thing that's wrong with you is that you think something's wrong with you. And it's so true. And he would call it the voodoo curse from like doctors. And that's what can set off like a whole chain, but you're actually fine. You're totally fine. There's nothing wrong, like you said, with your nervous system or your
Yeah.
body. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, I often say something very similar. I'm like, you're not broken. You just think
no.
you are.
Yep. That's, yeah.
Think you
Yeah.
are. But when you think you are, you're constantly looking to fix yourself. And this goes well beyond symptoms, right? Um,
Yeah.
Even just the self-help and psychology world is based on this core belief that says, I'm broken, I'm messed up.
Mhm.
And so, there's I forget the book, but I read once in a book, self-help often means self-hate,
A
which is
hundred.
really interesting because self-help is generally a good thing. But who mostly buys self-help books?
Yep.
People who are really unhappy with who they are. And I got to fix myself. So I'm going to buy every self-help book I can get. My core message is you're not broken. Excuse me. Not physically, mentally, or emotionally.
Yeah, I love that because what is communicating to the brain if you're buying all these self-help books, which I was.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think I know I keep repeating this, but what I want to say, like me talking about the three professionals I went to, you don't need to do that. I just, I it just helped me because they were really compassionate. It gave me that reassurance, and you could really do that with anyone, even a family member if you need that, or yourself, mostly yourself, you should.
Right.
But yeah, it's really nice to be able to like be out of it now and see all of that.
Yeah.
Because when you're in it, you are doing the freak out. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, and I'm not saying therapists are good or bad or anything, but I don't think therapy is a required step.
No,
I don't think meditation is a required step. I mean, Christine's done the Dr. Joe Dispenza stuff and
not a required step.
not required.
No.
A lot of people in my group coaching program are getting better without meditating, without journaling, without doing emotional work, without therapy. My core approach is understand how this system called the human body and brain works. Once we understand that, we can recognize that, okay, we have a brain operating perfectly, but just on bad data and fear. And when we fix the bad data, the fear can come down. And when the brain is not perceiving danger, excuse me, all day, every day, the alarm systems can get turned off. And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
you've been feeling great since what, March?
Yeah, I would say probably like April is when but yeah, the turning point. March was like my last rock bottom, and then it's been great. And it's what you said. You don't need to do any of that fixing stuff. It's mostly what you say, which is yeah, just like go live your life and the knowledge. I
But
think it's
yeah,
the
but
knowledge.
take it from the intellect to knowing deeply that
Yes.
you're okay.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I keep saying this, but you simplify it. What you just said is all people have to do. They don't have to do any fixing stuff
Yeah.
because, again, if you're a TMS or a PDP or whatever it is, you're probably going to turn that into a new project to become a perfectionist at if you're anything like me. So, yeah.
And I can only imagine the amount of dollars that were spent by you and your family to get you through the
Yeah,
past
I'm
5 years.
really grateful for my parents. I am so grateful for them and just having a really great support system and family because yeah, I don't even want to like, I don't even know how much, but I can't imagine. I mean, I can imagine it was a lot.
For all these programs and 5 months in LA to work with this. Yeah, like,
Yeah, I'm really lucky, but yeah, it's a lot of money and you
but
can
none of
actually
that is necessary is the point.
none of it's necessary. It's coming from you can just heal yourself and just like you said, if you have I don't even the word heal, like if you know you're okay, yeah, that's really all you need is what you said from the heart to your mind and that true knowing that you're fine is and that's kind of what it's exactly what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about. Like he knows that too. It's just sometimes if you're new to meditating and you're a perfectionist, you might go at it a little hard initially,
Yeah,
but it's, yeah, you're all saying like stuff that's always been so helpful, but once you finally believe it yourself is the turning point. Yeah.
awesome. Well, we're going to wrap this up. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you sharing your story. For anybody with throat pain, or even like in your case, you had other pains in other parts of your
Yeah,
body,
yeah, my face. I
face,
think I was
feet.
just so focused here because it felt very the most intense for me, but everywhere, face, eyes, anywhere you could really imagine.
Yeah. And at this point, you're symptom free, right?
Yeah. Oh, I also had like the stupid, which this can go away too, ringing in the ears. I had really any symptom you can
So
imagine of a body that's,
your ringing in the ears has also gone?
I mean, yeah, and that was just on and off. And I, again, that, because that didn't scare me as much as the other stuff is why I know it all goes away because you're not as afraid.
That's
So,
awesome.
anyway, yeah, it's all gone.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you sharing your story. I really appreciate your friendship with the lady in
Yeah.
the community who you're friends with. That's
Awesome.
the other
Yeah.
thing. A lot of people in this community end up getting to know each other, and in my opinion, making sometimes lifetime friends.
Yeah. It's cool. So you mentioned her. So obviously her in the community, and then the other woman I was saying with the nervous system joke who also spoke to her deep. When I speak to them, I'm like, my goodness, like, do we live in the same brain? Because our symptoms and the fears are all very similar. But the really cool thing, and I know they'll get to share their success stories with you, but yeah, the one woman with very similar like throat stuff for 7 months, she just shared a few days ago, like we've been talking maybe every day for a month, and she watches your videos too and loves them. But yeah,
Good.
she had said that she's had several days of like no pain in that area coming from such intense pain. And I know the other woman you just mentioned is having moments like that too. So very exciting.
Wonderful. Well, listen, I
Yeah,
really appreciate you. Thank you for sharing this.
same
And
here.
I'm going to go ahead and hit stop on the recording.
Awesome.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. I appreciate you. Take care.